button. Sometimes I do. Okay. So I find it very interesting that, when Geshe gave these teachings in July and uh, indicated for me to, do a review or follow up of each of the topics. And somehow, interestingly, we sort of went backwards. Geshe gave the last teaching Geshe gave was on the Bodhisattva vow. So that was the first. We did 2 weeks on that, spent 1 month on that. And then last time we did on Buddhist philosophy, which was on the Sunday. And now we're going to the first teaching that he gave on perception, reality, and bliss. So, yeah, so just this week and next week. So, of course, this is a massively huge and profound topic. So we're really just tipping our toes into the waters of this topic, if you like. It's really profound. And basically, it covers the entire teachings on the true truths, on conventional truth and ultimate truth, and the result of that knowledge of the two truths. And within that, which is the two aspects of the path, we talk about method and wisdom. And so actually we talk about method and wisdom, if you saw the difference there. So that the method side is our compassionate action, compassion in action. And we say that we place that in that hand in the hand of wisdom or skillful means, or, having the knowledge, the abilities and whatever to do whatever we can. So we have to be realistic and conjoining the two together, method and wisdom. Okay, so conventional truth and ultimate truth. And then actualizing these two aspects of the path, the method and wisdom. And through that, we're able to actualize eventually the ultimate spiritual purpose of Mahayana Buddhist practice. As we just said in our refuge and bodhicitta prayer, or what we did say was, may I become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So then we talk about attaining the two bodies of a Buddha. So we can look at the bodies of the Buddha, 2, 3, 4 bodies of a Buddha, of a Buddha. I mean, there's Buddhas on every atom of space, that we're not aware of that. But however, if we're looking at one Buddha, so we talk about the Rupakaya, the form body. So that Rupakaya has typically, well, let's just say 2 aspects. It also has 3 aspects, but let's stick to the 2. The Sambhogakaya we call enjoyment body. And that body is represented in the sort of deity forms that we see around here. And that can only be perceived by someone who has a direct perceptual realization of emptiness. We call them an arhat or an Arya being, that they really directly perceive reality without having to use conceptual mind, which is what we have to do. So then the other aspect, out of compassion for us, is a Namanakaya aspect, which, like Shakyamuni Buddha, taking the form of a saffron-robed monk to be able to turn the wheel of Dharma in a way that we as human beings, even we weren't there necessarily at the time of the Buddha, because why are we still here if we, anyway, maybe we were there, who knows. But, and then of course, today in this world, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is regarded as the Buddha of compassion. And again, the Buddha of compassion. So this is 1,000-arm Chenrezig, Buddha of compassion, or 4-arm, 8-arm. We don't see that. We see, again, a saffron-robed monk, right? You can say the Dalai Lama has, again, taken that aspect. We can say that Jesus Christ took that aspect, in order to benefit beings. As His Holiness said, Jesus Christ was a great bodhisattva, a great holy being. But of course, we know that it was a great holy being in any case. So taking an aspect that we can relate to, sometimes that Namanakaya aspect is also called like a utility body or an artisan body. They might be, practiced in arts and crafts. And so we just never know. They can take the body of an animal. They can take whatever is going to be of benefit. Okay. So these two aspects, and that's what we're aiming to achieve, is these two bodies. So the other body is called the wisdom body or truth body, which is not actually a body. It's the wisdom mind of a Buddha that knows everything that is to be known. Everything that is to be known is known by a Buddha. As human beings, we're learning more and more and more that is to be known, but not any one of an ordinary human being knows everything that there is to be known. It's very fascinating when you look at the sutras and like Insamantabhadra's prayer, where it talks about atoms and so forth. And you think, what do they know about atoms? And you look into the Buddha's sutras, as Buddha said, if you can prove anything I say to be wrong, this is what scientific approach does, isn't it? Prove it right or wrong. If you can prove it wrong, chuck it out. Or we say, well, nothing's been proven wrong so far. But given that we can't prove it wrong, even we don't understand it, we just leave it there, I say on the back burner, let it simmer away, and one day we might understand a little bit more, so we can relax. Okay. If we can prove it wrong, Buddha is happy for us to chuck it out, because the only thing he was interested in was what? The truth, reality, and guiding us to that. So all the great Buddhas, the great scholars of the past, the great bodhisattvas, again and again have stated that these two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth, are to be known. You know, we have to know what they are, unpack and be clear what's conventional truth and what's ultimate truth, and not conflate one into the other. We get very confused when we do that. And then, of course, you know, in the teaching, turning of the wheel, the first turning of the wheel of the Buddha and the Four Noble Truths, the true path is to be practiced. But we want to know what is the true path. You know, or in other words, if I want to become a Buddha, I want to be able to follow a path that's guaranteed to lead me to Buddha, not down the garden path to something else. You know, so we want to have, that's why we have, you know, within that context of a Mahayana practice, which is the motivation to become a Buddha, then we have to have authentic teachers who are ahead of us on the path, who can guide us in that way. So these two bodies of the Buddha, we can only attain by completing that path. And keep in mind that that path, as Shakyamuni Buddha demonstrated, takes 3 countless great eons. Now, what is one countless great eon? It's countless. Yeah. So
what's an eon?
What's an eon? So a countless great eon, I don't know what an eon is. I do look it up from time to time, and there are different indications of how many gazillions of years it is. But I think an eon is the time of a world system coming into and out of existence, but I'd have to check that too. I think.
What's the story about the turtle and the ring moving on?
That's right. Well, that's the one about every 100 years. So a blind turtle, the likelihood of a blind turtle every 100 years, when it pops its head up out of the water, popping it up through a golden yolk and actually actually going through the golden yolk. So the likelihood of that is analogous to what we say a precious human rebirth, the rarity of being born human. Okay, that's that one. And so, and there's all different stories about what the golden yolk represents and the turtles and that, so we don't need to go into that. But one of the analogies for a countless great eon is if every 100 years, something about 100 years, you brush a cloak on against a mountain, rub it across a mountain, the time that it takes for that mountain to erode is a countless great eon. So a very, 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 very long time. So when we don't get the teachings in this life, relax, relax. I mean, we've probably heard the teachings before and not got them then, but having those imprints in our mind has got us here. And we make strong prayers to re-engage, and here we are, and we just, every bit we learn, we go more and more, we go further. Of course, you know, I rejoice if you get enlightened in this lifetime. I mean, conditions can arise for that. But, you know, let's have low expectations. Doesn't mean don't practice. It just means have low expectations. Don't set the bar too high. I'm not like them. Well, I'm not. That's why I've got them as my teachers. Okay, so we can only attain these two bodies of a Buddha by completing the entire path to enlightenment. So this is, you know, the stages of the path, and this is presented in many different ways. So we can look at this in terms of sutra and tantra, particularly within a Vajrayana context. The presentation on the parts, and we talk about 5 different parts, that you go from one to the other. And just to go back to the 3 countless great eons, the first countless great eon, it's up until you accomplish that direct perceptual realization of emptiness, you become an Arya being. An Arya being is you're no longer an ordinary being. You attain what's called the path of seeing, the sort of idea that you can't unsee, that you actually see reality as it is, which relates to this topic, perception, reality, and bliss. And you abide in this blissful nirvana, apparently, in a state of eternal bliss, if you don't keep going further. And then on the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva path, there's 10 grounds. And I'd say that from ground 1 to grade 7, ground 7 inclusive, is another countless great eon. And then ground 8 to 10, which are called the pure grounds, is another countless great eon, including that you have to complete the practices of Tantra. Even you may have started Tantra, like some people here have taken Tantric empowerments, even highest yoga Tantric empowerments, but you need to complete that in order to become a Buddha. So that's why I'm saying relax. It's a long haul. It's a long haul. We're in it for the long haul. Just that's what we need to remember. So in order to complete this path, we've got to have complete, correct wisdom. You know, we talk about the perfection of wisdom, the knowledge, if you like, of the entirety of the 2 truths, conventional and ultimate. So having that correct wisdom. And Buddha's teachings are all about learning that, learning about the mind. I mean, where else do we learn actually about the mind? I wish they brought it into kindergarten. That would be good. Even preschool. So learning the different characteristic of the mind, all minds, the fact that we don't just have one mind, we have mind or consciousness or awareness of all the sense consciousnesses, you know, eye, ear, nose, tongue, that's taste, yeah, and tactility. Did I get them all? Ear, eye, ear, nose, tongue, tactility. We have those, plus we have mental consciousness, which is when we think of mind, we mostly think of this one, don't we? So we have a whole plethora of studies on this, that from the Buddhist teachings, we talk about mind or minds and mental factors, the different like virtuous mental factors, non-virtuous mental factors, omnipresent virtuous factors that we need to even function, and then changeable ones that can be virtuous or non-virtuous. So we go on. And typically that's presented as a list of 51, but the Buddha said there's 84,000 mental factors. And that topic is either presented mind and mental factors, or awareness and knowers, these are all synonymous in terms of learning about the different characteristics of the mind, the different types of perception, the different mental faculties. And why do we want to learn about all of these? Because they impact or even set the tone of our view of reality, how we perceive reality, how we, and then on top of that, create different forms of actions that bring about the potential of consequences in relation to our experiences and different aspects of our experiences, both in the ordinary day-to-day life and also in our spiritual life, in our spiritual journey. This is why we learn about it. So basically learning about perception itself is the key job of being a Buddhist student. So learning about and then learning how to transform our mind. Why can we transform our mind? Limitlessly. It's non-physical. The mind is not physical. The mind is not the brain. It depends on the brain to function. We're not throwing the brain out, but it is separate from. And in a Buddhist presentation, that subtle level of mind, that mental continuum that goes on lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that mind can only come from a previous moment of mind. So the conclusion is beginningless mind. You go, beginningless? But there's a beginning to everything. No, the Buddha said, why? Why do we want beginnings? So, of course, we don't just take, as the Buddha said, don't take what I say at face value. You check it up, you take my teachings apart, you analyze them like a goldsmith would analyze gold, burn it and cut it and whatever else they do to it to check if it's the real deal. Because you don't want someone to say, oh, here's my gold, whatever, ingot. You want to make sure it's the real deal, because I haven't checked the price of gold, lady, but it is incredibly expensive. I know that in 2008, I think an ounce was $250. So now it must be like $1,000 or something. I don't know. It's a lot of money. So you want to make sure you got the real deal. So that's what the Buddha says. Take it apart, pull it apart, make it make sense to you. If it doesn't make sense, backburn. If you prove it wrong, out it goes. This is why we can say the Buddha took a scientific approach. And we see that today with the Dalai Lama's meeting with mind scientists, getting together with quantum physicists and so forth, having dialogue to have that exchange from a scientific point of view on the teachings of the Buddha. Yeah. Okay, so our key job, learning about what are those perceptions that are not helpful to us, that are not useful, and how to construct beneficial, useful, correct perceptions, valid perception. So we're talking about what is a valid perception. So we'd say a valid conventional perception would be one that's accepted in the world. So we all accept this is a mug. Okay, it's a mug with a lid on, but we all accept that, isn't it? And so we say on the basis of it having a form, a shape, a certain shape, which we recognize as mug, but then it also has to have a function. This one, function suitable to hold the water, right? I could say suitable because it's a mug for me to hold it, therefore it has a handle. So it has both form and function in general, and we accept it, that yes, that's mug in the world. If I pick this up and say that's mug, you're going to say you're crazy, right? Well, you may not say that, you'll be polite, but you'll just think you're wrong because it's not accepted in the world as a mug. Even we have very fancy different shapes and sizes of mugs. Still that's not a mug yet. Okay. So we determine what's a valid perception, and then we accumulate all those valid, beneficial perceptions, we'd say, that are in sync with reality, until we become perfected in those. We whether in terms of the teachings we're following sutra teachings or tantric teachings of the Buddha. So in this sutra presentation, it's very much focused on purification, detoxing our mind of all the limitations of our perceptions, the limitations of the mind, the delusions of the mind. The delusions means it's not in sync with reality. You know, we have a certain state of mind. So I have an angry mind. I'm going to, if it's directed to a person, I might be angry initially with they didn't put out the garbage bins, you know, just one thing. But then over time, what do I do with that anger? Oh, I can't stand the way you talk. I can't stand the way you walk. I can't stand the way you dress. In fact, you're useless altogether. We elaborate, right? And so we create this mind of this comes from a mind of aversion, which we are very good at, you know, that coming from this toxic mind, which is what anger is. Why is it toxic? Because it totally hijacks our mind. It disturbs our equilibrium of mind, our mental equilibrium. Anything that disturbs our mental equilibrium is a negative mind state, right? So sometimes there are negative mind states we wouldn't regard, like desire is a negative mind state. It's okay to be attracted to things, that's fine. But when it becomes craving, desire, that is, you know, a sensual craving, you know, which is sensual, meaning based on the senses, either to the eyes, to the ears, whatever, and then our mind gets disturbed by that, then that's toxic, right? That's not good for us. So why stay there in that morass of suffering, the Buddha would say. The Buddha would say that, you know, we have to identify those states of mind through the tools of Dharma and cultivate the correct, if we say, attitude, the method side. Look at the things that are what would be antidotal to a mind of anger, a mind of love, of care, of concern, maybe a mind of compassion, you know, and the practice of what we call, well, particularly the method side is the first 5 of the 6 perfections. So perfection of generosity. This overcomes our grasping, our miserliness, our miserly mind. It's mine. And then I have to protect what's mine and then I have to insure it because that's how I protect it. And then things get very expensive. I'm not saying don't take out insurance if you can afford it, but this sense of things being my possession and I don't want to share it with anyone else, that grasping, miserly mind. So counteracting that, and it's in all faith traditions, it's also just a general thing in society. We're used to the practice of generosity. You know, just in the Buddhist context, it's not actually giving things away. Of course, we do that when we can, and we've got our charity collection here for foodstuffs and so forth for this time of year. So that's out there. People are happy to contribute as long as it's whatever it says, you know, non-perishables and within the use by date, or comfortably within the use by date, not expiring tomorrow. So we have opportunities to practice generosity. Generosity in the Buddhist teachings is the wish to give. So we look for the opportunities. Yes, there's giving material help, you know, giving food, giving medicine, giving shelter, giving also freedom, protection from fear. So I always think about dogs when I think of the pet dogs, protection from fear, because when I had a pet dog, she was terrified of lightning, and as many dogs are, and fireworks, right, as well, sounds like lightning. Anyway, something that's a threat. And so she used to jump up on the couch next to me and come as close as possible. And I didn't know whether in her mind I was going to protect her, probably was that, or that if we're going to go, we'll go together, maybe. But I think it was, I was the protector, going her. Help, not scared. So freedom from fear is one of the things that we can offer in whatever capacity we can do that. And, you know, traditionally in the teachings. And of course, another one is love, giving love. We can all do that. We can all affectionate love, you know, not just to our friends and family, to anybody, a caring concern, holding others in our care. And of course, if we're able to give the Dharma in an appropriate way, like, you know, I've got a role to do that here, so I'm very happy to fulfill that, and I love to do that. But we can, like, we have free books and this and that, or, you know, there are different ways according to our capacity that we can share the Dharma to those who are interested. We don't force it on anybody, of course. Even when I was in the first guy I visited in prisons, you know, the first guy I visited, and anyway, so we started visiting him, and then another guy, and then before you know it, we've got a group. And one day I turned up to the chapel and he goes, "I've brought the whole wing." And I'm like, "Did they want to come?" "Oh, yeah." "Are you sure?" I said, "We're not into converting people. Like, if they want to come, it's fine." But I hope you haven't forced anyone to be here. Anyway, dear God. So through the practice, so generosity and ethical conduct or moral conduct, basically being a good person, you know, being careful at our speech is not doing harm, not coming from a mind of harm. So we're training our body, speech, and mind to come from a place of benefit, of kindness, of loving, caring, concern, of compassion, and so forth. And not doing the opposite in our actions, in our speech. But underlying that is training the mind. And the practice of patience. Patience in our practice of doing that. Practice in our patience in our practice of the Dharma, practice in our when we have hardships or illness or so forth, practice of patience in relation to those who want to give us harm, not getting angry back, not retaliating, and so forth. I mean, skillfully remove ourselves from the situation, if you know, take whatever steps necessary. It's not being a doormat, but not escalating an anger situation. In the practice of joyous effort, because we all come to the Dharma and start off very enthusiastic, but to keep going, long haul, countless great eons, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of perseverance, as the Dalai Lama says, never give up, never give up. And sometimes you're just like, oh, it's getting a bit hard, getting a bit too hard, etc. But never giving up, having this attitude not only of persevering, but joyously. So having to find the joy, refresh our joy in the practice, because that's a very uplifting, very powerful state of mind. And if you're not sure about that, watch Mission Joy again and again. Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, spreading the joy. And talking about adversities in their life, and yet still very uplifted by joy. And then the practice of concentration, of being, this is where we are able to make our minds serviceable to develop these correct perceptions. But first of all, we have to have control of the mind that gets distracted here, there, and everywhere to all sorts of things all the time. And then we're wondered why at the end of the day we're exhausted, with our minds being working overtime, you know, responding to all the sensory input. So to develop this focused, calm mind that is able to focus on one thing and abide there. That's a mind of concentration, not squeezing the mind, but allowing it to settle into its natural state of stillness. So, and then on top of that, once we've got the mind like that, is then the analytical side. And here, that analytical side is relation to reality, what reality is, and understanding our mental, all these mental factors, and then applying that mind of wisdom in meditation to develop what we call paths. Paths are mind states in our mental continuum that are beneficial. Okay. And so and then eventually those become realizations, Dharma realizations. And then in relation to Tantra, so we can call Tantra a direct antidote to the entire impure perceptions, wrong perceptions, incorrect, mistaken minds, and all these toxic emotions that don't benefit us. So from the very moment we enter the path of Tantra, we actualize Tantra, we actualize mantra. It doesn't mean you've suddenly completed the path, but it's Tantra really, or mantra, is called the protection of the mind. Mantra itself literally means protection for the mind. What's it protecting it from? Protecting it from our ordinary mind that says, I'm no good, I can't, I'll never get it, blah, 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 beating ourselves up, right? Which, as Lama Yeshe said, is a total waste of, he said it's the worst form of laziness, total waste of time, this mind that beats itself up, because we disempower ourselves in that. So then, in Tantra, we're protecting from impure states of mind, impure perceptions. So from the beginning, we train to visualize our own identity and that of others, not seeing as ordinary, seeing as divine deities. If I regard myself and others as divine deities who are very powerful, I'm going to have a very, at least, very respectful attitude towards others, aren't I? At least hold them in awe, and then from an ordinary environment, transforming that, perceiving it as a celestial abode. So for some of us, we could see this Gompa as a celestial abode, the mandala of the Buddha, the Buddhas, and then seeing ordinary sound, speech as mantra, as the sound of mantra. And the sounds of mantra typically are Sanskrit sounds that are positive, pure vibrations. So we set up pure vibrations within the environment, positive vibrations. So as Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say to us, you chant Om Mani Padme Hum, 10 malas. Takes about 10 minutes to do that, Om Mani Padme Hum, at a reasonable rate. And you go into water, you go for a swim, and all the beings in the water get blessed by that mantra. And Rinpoche also said you will not be harmed by snakes. It was very helpful to think about that when I was at Chenrezig Institute. It has a lot of snakes. It's not that I didn't see snakes, but I never was attacked by snakes. In fact, I never knew anyone who was. Did you know anyone who was attacked? I mean, people would have, some encounters, yes. People would say, I just walked into my retreat hut and there's a snake right in the middle of the room. This is why we always have to keep the screen doors closed, snakes and other beings. But nobody was harmed. So I think a lot of animals go to the Dharma Center because they know they're safe. It's a positive environment. Anyway, is a very positive environment. So it's like creating out of what we see as ordinary, transforming that into perceiving that as a pure land. Like when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was at Swayambhu in Nepal. So Swayambhu, Lama Zopa said, it's like a natural crystal stupa inside the mountain hill that is Swayambhu. But on top, there's all these temples and so forth. But here is a sort of natural crystal stupa. So he said to circumambulate around the base of that. But anyway, he was up the top with Nick Rebush, who was since the Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche ever started teaching, has been transcribing those teachings and making them available to all of us in Lama Yeshe list of archives. Really precious. So he's been around a long time. And they were up the top there, and Rinpoche said to Nick, looking down below, what do you see? What do you see? Oh, and he said, oh, a lot of filth and garbage, traffic jams, there's honking horns, there's, it wasn't a pretty sight, let's say. And then Rinpoche said, I see a pure land. So it's a big take to go from filth and pollution and dust and, whatever, to a pure land. But anyway, it's all in our perception, basically, saying it's all in our perception. So we see this in the first teaching of the Buddha in the Dhamma, well, not the first teaching, but the teaching of the Buddha in the collection, that is the Dhammapada, the collection of quotes from the Buddha, where he says in relation to perception, because the perception, the mind, creates our world. Lama Yeshe would say we create our own universe. We each have our own sort of universe. We are the creator of our own experience, everything, right? So our perception is the thing that creates all our experiences, all the experiences we're going to experience. So the Buddha said, mind is the forerunner of all actions. It's a thought. There has to be some motivation to act, intention to act, isn't it? All deeds are led by the mind, created by the mind. If one speaks or acts with a corrupt mind, suffering follows. Now, we might look at the world today and go, yeah, there's a lot of that around. And there is. We are right. We see the suffering that comes from corrupt minds, right? The wars, the whatever. So if we act with a corrupt mind, we could say a mistaken mind, a wrong awareness, then suffering follows. As the wheel follows the hoof of an ox pulling a cart. We're talking 2,600 years ago. As the wheel follows the hoof of an ox pulling a cart. In other words, they're inevitably linked. What would we say? The wheels on a car go round it. Yeah. And then mind is the forerunner of all actions. All deeds are led by the mind, created by the mind. If one speaks or acts with a serene mind, and that's what we all want, isn't it? A serene mind, happiness follows as surely as one's shadow follows you. So like that. So it's really, the Buddha's saying, perception is the initiator of the kind of world we live in for each one of us. And we have this collectivity, and we look around the world and say, well, there's a lot of unhappy places in the world, but I think we live in a very beautiful, harmonious place here in Perth, isn't it? So there's a lot of happiness. There's a lot of peaceful minds. Of course, we're going to argue. Of course, there's going to be Christmas lunches that, unfortunately, some families don't agree with each other, and they've had long life, lifelong debates if they push certain buttons or whatever. That's not the experience in my family, so I don't really know that experience from a family point of view, and I feel very happy about that, even though we're all of different faiths and we get on very, very well. But I know that everybody doesn't. So happiness, suffering, good, bad, everything is dependent on the quality of our perception, right? Isn't it? So whether it's got to do with our momentary experience, our temporal experience, or more long-term, these layers on our mental continuum that we could say we've built up over lifetimes of habit, of ways of thinking and perceiving, and that in the future, that's going to influence our future experience. But we have the capacity to transform our mind because it is not physical, it is non-material, so there's nothing stopping it except the limitations we place on it. It's the only thing. So it's not dependent ultimately on things externally. We can say that's all very well, but you know, when stuff happens, it does affect us. However, when we turn our perception in order to benefit our life, we're able to enjoy life more. We're able to see the meaning of life, have some sense of purpose in life. And when it's not in accord with that, then we live our life in either a meaningless way or a miserable way. So to bring us out of the misery does take us actually looking at our mind, looking at how we perceive things, looking at what our belief systems are, our attitudes are, and so forth. So our perception, our mind is the creator of our own hell. And it's also the creator of our own liberation, the bliss of nirvana, which is what the Buddha taught. We can all be free of these toxic states of mind. But this all depends on the quality of our perception in our day-to-day life. So today we can say how we experience today is very much dependent on the quality of our perception. Now, I did say it's not dependent on external things. However, you know, just coming out of the door next door to come into here, of course, I experience, even not having the aircon on over in the house there, and now it's a nice, acclimated environment. We've got the aircon very nicely, the fans, you know, making it all nice and comfortable. But the in-between was a little bit warm, but it was only from there to there. But I did notice, oh yes, my mind will respond differently to that. And probably tomorrow, I think it's even hotter tomorrow. Yes.
This might be backtracking a bit. When we say filtered perception, we're not saying just what we see, it's the story we put on it.
Yeah, so we can, yes, because it's also, we're going beyond just the immediate perception. So immediate perception, I perceive something with my eyes, I hear a sound, I smell something, I taste something, tactility, which at the moment is a nice coolness from the aircon, and then mental consciousness. But it's going beyond that, how we perceive. Here we're talking about how we perceive reality, which is a mental consciousness, right? So it's good to be specific about that, because this word perception applies across the board to all of these things. So today we're talking about it in this context in relation to how our mind, which is based on our past experiences, whatever attitudes, beliefs we have, expectations we have, and so forth, habits of mind.
So, excuse me.
Please.
So is perception then, just to follow on what what happens then if it gets to a point where you go, then there's attachment or aversion that creeps in?
Yes.
So is that is the attachment and the aversion still part of the perception?
Well, the attachment or aversion, so attachment is based on this grasping mind. So we have the mind grasping at desirous experiences. Correct. Yeah. Positive, sensual experiences. Our mind expects that. So that expectation is like an attitude of our mind, that everything should be nice and comfortable. There should never be any discomfort, right? And there's a lot of things in this world that can provide us. We've got very good at making life comfortable. In our world here, let's not talk about, contrast with Gaza, isn't it, or Ukraine at the moment. Even before that, Ukraine was living comfortably, very nicely, in general. Seeing how Ukraine was, you think, oh, that was a very, seemed to look like a very comfortable existence. And So it's a great shock then that comes to an end. Even you could say a temporary end. So we could say today is a nice sunny day, right? And then you feel comfortable with that. It's a nice sunny day. It's a beautiful day. So my mind is happy. My mind's content, right? Or you might feel that life, despite the sunny day, is quite gloomy. It's like we're down, we're depressed. It all feels dark. For example, when I was one time in Coolangatta over in the Gold Coast, and I went into this shop and I saw this woman in the shop. I saw that she saw me because, I'm looking like this, unusual in Coolangatta. Not many Buddhist nuns walking around. Anyway, so when I came out of the shop, she was picking up cigarette butts, that behavior of like, anyway, obviously she was looking for a smoke and she asked me for a light. And of course I didn't have a light. But I chatted with her. Everything, absolutely everything was negative, depressing, dark. I do not experience any happiness in my life was basically what she was saying, literally what she was saying. And so we would talk and I'd be doing the, well, what about? And nobody was going to help her. And then I'm again, oh, what about this and this and this and this and this and this? No, her mind was made up. Everything was in the nature of suffering and she was only ever going to suffer, right? So then your mind is very bleak. It's very down, isn't it? And so everything is really gloomy. And when you think there's no possibility for yourself, there is no possibility because you don't see any possibility. Even people can try and persuade this way and that to open up different perspectives. If your mind's not open to that, it's like, it's right over the top. That's how her situation was.
Is that like the mind looking for evidence to back up theory sort of thing?
It reinforces, yeah. And I didn't have the skillful means to find that particular thing that might turn her mind, right?
Sounds like she's
very difficult life. But I then have to think, but she did have that element of embarking in conversation with me, right? It's not about big noting me, but it's saying somebody who was trying to present a different perspective would say, in that element, there has to be a spark of hope, right? Reaching out in your bleakness. So I hope that she's still alive and a bit less bleak. So on the other hand, we could be experiencing quite difficult physical external situation, physical internal situations or external situations, being physically unwell, facing difficulties. And as long as we have a correct beneficial perception in our thinking, we can perceive that day, that very moment, as something meaningful, something beautiful. So one example came to mind from my experience. Well, a few did, but I chose this one. So 2008, I was in California. I had been spending my time, spending December. I was spending December at Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house in Aptos doing the water bowl offerings 5 hours a day, 3 of us. A lot of water bowls to be offered. And then I was based at Vajrayana Institute in Sydney, and I'd been asked to go and see Venerable Rene Fusi, who was in retreat nearby at Vajrapani, which was in the area, to go and see him and request him to come and teach at VR. And so I did that. He was in they have what was called the very hidden retreat hut. It meant it was right up the top. It was it was Christmas time, and it was raining horribly, and so I'm going up all these muddy tracks and everything to get up to his retreat place. And when I, said if he welcomed me in, I think he knew we'd made an arrangement. I didn't just sort of pop in unannounced. And it came in, and he said, "Oh, it's a horrible day, isn't it?" And I was like, "No, it's a beautiful day. It's a lovely day." Why was that? Because I got to meet him, and he's a sort of amazing meditator, practitioner, teacher, and so forth. So it can be a horrible day externally, but it depends on what conditions we bring to that, what motivations we bring to it. For me, it was joyful, right? So, yeah. So no matter what kind of world manifests outside, what manifests in our own mind is not dependent on that. It's very much dependent on our perception. For example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as I said, as Buddhists, as Tibetan Buddhists, we regard His Holiness the Dalai Lama as the Buddha Chenrezig, whether we perceive like that or not. I mean, the Dalai Lama says, "I'm a simple Buddhist monk." And I thought, well, the Dalai Lama never lies. So saying he's a simple Buddhist monk means he's not a complicated Buddhist monk. And this is true. This is what Paul Ekman said. He said, Paul Ekman reads micro expressions in faces. He's an expert witness at trials of people to check when they're lying, when nobody else can tell, because they're very good at masking when they're lying. Anyway, so he said the Dalai Lama is the only person who's met who has no masking, who's what you see is what you get. There's nothing else, right? So in that way, we could say, yes, he's a simple Buddhist monk. He doesn't complicate things. So that was useful for me to think in that way when he kept saying, "I'm a simple Buddhist monk." In any case, there are those of us who regard him as the Buddha in this world, that, he's always advocating peace, compassion, loving kindness, meets with people from, it doesn't matter if you're an important political figure or the person walking down the street, equally, he'll engage equally with everybody. And then some people just say, "Yeah, Dalai Lama, he's a nice guy." So they wouldn't necessarily seek out teachings or interviews or anything like that. He's a nice guy. Yes, he is a nice guy, but he's so much more than a nice guy. Anyway, so it's according to our perception, and there are some individuals who might not even think he's a nice guy. So yeah, it just depends on our views. And then we will think there are some people who have lots of complaints. I don't know if you know anybody in the world who seems to always complain no matter what, everything's terrible. The object is the same, whether it's a sunny day or whether it's a day you're going to complain about or whatever. The only difference is the mindset, the different setting of our perception. So again, when I was at Vajrayana Institute, one of the long-term students, one day she just said, "I'm going to give up complaining." I thought, how fantastic. You make a decision to give up complaining. You notice that your mind has a tendency to complain, and you just think, "You know what? I've had enough of this complaining mind. I'm going to stop that right now." So she stopped. I think that's wonderful. And we all need to make such decisions ourselves, that to make a decision, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. It only upsets me, it upsets everybody else. And remind ourselves, of course, we need to do that, to keep that commitment that we've decided, to practice restraint. And the more we do that, the more that non-complaining, let me say, state of mind, just using that example, it becomes our ground state rather than the complaining state of mind. Why complain when you can share love, when you can share compassionate connection, when you can share kindness, when you can share joy? Much more delightful states of mind, isn't it? Okay, so in all, the teachings, there's always flowers on the desk, so people always use the flowers. I'll take one.
I was going to bring in some real ones. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yes.
I looked at my garden this morning and I thought, I must bring in some real ones.
Well, you're always happy to also from next door as well, or whatever, bring some over when they're looking good. So even this flower, we're all relate to differently. He's apologizing for not bringing some fresh ones from his garden. So some people might say, oh, it's my favorite color. I like color. Or I love roses. It's my favorite. You know, I have a friend who can't smell. And I remember giving her flowers one time. She was so disinterested. We were teaching together. It was like, oh yeah. And I thought how much it was dependent on smell, being able to smell. So for her, she was indifferent, shall we say, to flowers. So different people, some people think beautiful, others think might have a lot of complaints. Oh, I don't like that colour, or it's not the right amount, or it's plastic, it's not even real, it's not fresh. It's been there for a long time. Why doesn't somebody get a new one? Why didn't someone bring from their garden? So we can have different points of view. So, you know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when Rinpoche discovered, so there's a house of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's in Washington State. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche discovered that he could plant the plastic flowers in the snow in winter. He was so delighted. He could have flowers all year round. So, you know, you just do. So very, very different. Or some people might say, oh, this leaf, of course it's a rose leaf, but anyway, some other people might go, you know what, it's a sort of same shape as a Bodhi leaf. It sort of reminds me of a Bodhi leaf. Therefore, it reminds me of the Buddha. Therefore, it reminds me of bodhicitta. Therefore, you know, it's got to do with enlightenment, and you feel uplifted, you feel joyous. So this is where our mind can do anything, right? Our mind can do anything. We can fill our heart with positivity, just with simple plastic flowers. Because it's all about how we construct our perception. And that brings all the types of experiences we have. So if we have a correct perception in relation to the even obstacles that we experience, I have to say, since meeting the Dharma, obstacles or hardships or difficulties have taken on a totally different meaning. Now it's like, oh, opportunity to purify the mind, opportunity to progress on the path, opportunity to see how much I haven't progressed on the path, etc. So, you know, if everything's going along nicely, we feel no motivation to do anything differently, isn't it? Well, it's all everything's going swimmingly. It's only when we do actually experience hardship, when we experience difficulties, that suddenly we go, something's got to change here. Usually it's something out there that's got to change, not me. But actually the Buddha said, well, actually, it's all about you. But, you know, even from our suffering, we can experience bliss. We can experience great purpose. So, for example, beginning of 2009, 2008. Anyway, when Chodron Rinpoche first came to Australia, we greeted him at the airport in Sydney, came back to Vajrayana Institute. I'd just got back from that trip to America. No, I hadn't. It was 2008. I got back from the trip to India and Nepal. Yes. Anyway, so we greeted a Chodron Rinpoche, and, you know, I was feeling a bit off, and I ignored what my dear Dharma sister, who's actually a nurse, kept telling me, that I look grey and I should go to the doctor. I ended up in hospital with pneumonia, right? And before Chodron Rinpoche started teaching. And of course, what does my mind do? Poor, pity me, I'm not there, I'm here, blah, blah, blah. And then I get a phone call. I think, it took me about 10 hours at least to ring Geshe Sampton and say, help. Anyway, he said, I was just going to ask Chodron Rinpoche. So he comes back with a message from Chodron Rinpoche, who gives me instructions of practice. And then he says, the suffering I'm experiencing, better than eons of hotels. Here comes our eons again. I think, great, I can do this thing, bring on the suffering. And then I thought, oh, not too much. My mind is very limited. But at least it was like, okay, he's giving me instructions. That's going to keep me busy. And then someone from the centre would bring in a recording of his teachings. I'd play that in my ears. And at the time, I was doing the Nyondra, the preliminary practice of prostrations. So I figured out, with the drip there, I could prostrate on the floor. Some people have said maybe that wasn't a very good idea. I might have made myself sicker. But
all the time my husband was in hospital, then he dropped on the floor and never picked it up.
Anyway, I managed to continue doing all my practices, and then with great expectations, I'd sit on the edge of the bed waiting to have permission to have day release to go to the teachings. So, and nuns came to visit me, such that the woman in the next bed said to me, how did I become Buddhist? I said to her, are you Christian? Yes. And I said, well, pray to God. She said, well, he's not picking up the phone. And I said, well, keep trying, he's busy. Anyway, so like that. So it's like suddenly what I felt was deprivation, with the words of the Lama, transformed into opportunity for practice. So here I could pull around the curtain, have my own meditation room, especially early in the morning, quite early in the morning. So, yeah, it wasn't a positive situation in terms of being ill and not being at the Dharma Centre, but it, gave me an opportunity to transform it into practice. And, with the guidance of lamas who, cut across our poor me mind, is why we have them, isn't it? So that was a great opportunity to cultivate the practice of patience with the Dharma practice, patience with hardship, patience with illness. So if we don't have correct perception, then everything could be going along nicely, moments that everyone else is experiencing happiness and we feel, oh, nothing's going well, bleed like my poor dear woman in Kurungata. Even you have abundance, you feel poor. And this can happen, having grown up myself in a family that was quite poor, with a lot of children and not a lot of income, actually makes you very resourceful. But then you can develop this mind of poverty. Even you can have abundance, you can have ample resources and so forth. There's still this mind of poverty, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's true. We can be like that. We haven't sort of reset the mindset. Or in a relationship, you're in a relationship but you feel lonely, right? Or in friendship, you sort of doubt your friends, or they don't, if they knew the real me, or they wouldn't be my friend, I don't know, whatever. But if you have a correct perception, something that's focusing on wholesome things, beneficial things, you see goodness in everything and every experience. Again, when I was at Vajrayana Institute, there was a visit from this Austrian woman, Tara Lamo, and she met her Lama. She said when she was 19 in wherever she was in Europe, it's one of those S1, Sweden, Switzerland, one of those countries. And he said, come and visit me in Nepal, in Bodha, near Kathmandu. And he gave her an address. And so she, went there. and the address, she was showing it around people around Boulder, and they're saying there's no such place, there's no such street. We just make up names for streets. So, so you think she's not going to find him. And then eventually either someone said, why don't you try down there? Or she tried down there. And there he was looking out a window, called out to her, and she came up and spent the next 3 years with him doing all these, gaining teachings and practices. And then he sent her up into the mountains to do retreat. She said it took a couple of days to get up there. She had Sherpas guiding, whatever. And she said the first night she slept too close to the fire and her sleeping bag and puffer jacket burnt. So she didn't have them anymore. I mean, she didn't get burnt herself, but they got burnt. And so freezing cold, and they're climbing up. It was a lot of physical hardship, the way she described. And then she ended up in this hut, which was her retreat hut, and that had holes. And it was very windy. The wind went through, like it was a wooden hut, but there were gaps. And she had sweet wrappers, so she would, over time, use the sweet wrappers to fill up the gaps. And I hope she had a lot of sweets. It was 20 years. She ended up there for 20 years. But at the beginning, she had she had water, but no hot water, nothing to heat it with, etc. It was harsh, it was difficult. And then after a while, the visitors realised she wasn't one of these fly-by-night Westerners who flies in and then says it's too hard and flies out. She was enduring, so they came and supported and helped her and gave her food and helped her out. So she was there for 20 years until this was now 20 years later, where her guru said to come to Australia and to talk about her experience, which is what she was doing. She said, I don't know, I'm just following my guru's advice. I have nothing to say. Anyway, so she was asked, from your experience up there in hut, in retreat, in meditation, in Nepal, to life in Sydney, it must be an entirely different experience, right? She said, no, it's the same. So the external conditions very different, but her internal experience, I would suspect it was one that was quite blissful. No difference. Of course, she didn't say what her internal experience was. But yeah. So I really liked to hear her story, because he was a Westerner who had attained these states that we often, we look to, but they're, they're in the Himalayas, they're from Tibet, they're different to us.
They've been doing it since
they've been doing it for lifetimes, etc., etc. And here was this young woman, well, she wasn't quite so young anymore, but who, from a Western country, was able to speak to the same experience. So coming back to, for an ordinary person, of course, we have a lot of mistaken views. We have a lot of wrong views. We have a lot of harmful views. And when you study something like awareness and knowledge, it goes into the different types of wrong minds we can have. We don't need to go into that because it's a big, long study. And I was thinking about, because I often use the example in the teachings of the mountains. I mean, let's face it, Tibet's in the Himalayas, and they often use, and, why is the mountain blue? Is the mountain blue? And so I think about the Blue Mountains, of course, over east, and it's a great tourism destination. It's very famous, it's heritage listed. And then we're going to say, well, the Blue Mountains are not blue, right? They're not blue, are they? But we perceive them as blue. Why do we perceive them as blue? Because there's this blue haze across them. And we perceive blue mountains. And we'd say this was, a wrong perception. They're not blue from their own side. And yes, we label them as that, right? We label them, the Blue Mountains. Immediately I've got an image of the Blue Mountains as soon as I say that.
Was it was something to do with the eucalyptus oil, the sunshine or something?
Well, it is the haze, so whether that's got anything to do with the eucalyptus oil, I don't know, but it's that haze. But, you know, before it was named Blue Mountains, actually it was named in English a couple of other things. The Aboriginal name in 1892 was Kolomata. So just think if it got renamed Kolomata, would that change our association with Blue Mountains? I mean, it's just a thought. Like, for example, Uluru, you know, Ayers Rock got given its name, its Aboriginal name, Uluru, or Fraser Island got given its Aboriginal name, Kagari. You know, they have this dual naming system. So what I'm saying is these are mere labels that we impute on things, and then we relate to the label. Right? We relate to the label, not the actual thing, and we see the thing as that image that we have. It's a good thing to interrogate our mind around that, and just, you know, use different examples. So all the Dharma teachings are a guide to shape our perception, to correct our attitudes. And when we have right views, it's very fulfilling. It's very profoundly meaningful. When our heart feels empty, despair, these things, it's because of holding wrong views and attitudes. For example, you know, we have these classic presentations on wrong views, and some of those are things of holding things as permanent, holding on to permanence. It's dangerous. That as I like to remind people, the first and last teaching of the Buddha was on impermanence, that everything is subject to change. But don't we not want things to change? I mean, as innocuous as when we changed the furniture out there from one side to the other. Oh, this isn't going to work. People won't, you know, just by making the welcoming right opposite the door where people could come in and be welcome, be seen. Someone can see them, not hidden behind over there. Oh, this isn't going to work. And then over there is, you know, people sit around and have chats. We have meetings there. We have whatever. It just is a change. It's good to change up the energy rather than everything is not fixed on the ground, you know, here. Things move. And yet we want to hold on to everything as being, it will go on forever. Diamonds are forever, or this relationship is forever. Again, I didn't look at the percentage of relationships that break up. It used to be 60%. I think it's much higher these days because people live longer. I find it fascinating when people split up after like 70 years, 60 years. So it's interesting, isn't it? But that could be my perception, that why bother at that age? My perception. It's not their perception because they broke up. Maybe they fell in love with someone else. But even that relationship, even you stay together, one's going to die first, usually. I mean, the other one's not going to say, I'll come with you, usually, let's say. So, you know, you're going to be separated by death, and we have to accept that. But everything is, you know, changing constantly, and yet we grab onto it as unchanging because we don't like change in general. Correct? Am I right? In general, we don't like change. I mean, we can do some change. You know, you can have different haircuts, you can have whatever, different clothes. I mean, all those things we're happy with. But actual fundamental, what feels like fundamental change, yeah. So we have this thing of grasping at things to be permanent. It feels more reassuring, unchanging. And this is totally out of sync with reality. Everything that comes into existence has to go out of existence. Every time I hear, like I heard again today, that heart attack is the greatest cause of death, or salt, which causes high blood pressure, which causes heart attack, it's the greatest cause of death. So I always come back to, no, being born, that pervades. That's 100% guaranteed. Being born guarantees death, right? 100%. But of course, I don't have a medical hat on when I say that. So I'm not coming from the medical profession. So if you're coming from the medical profession, you're going to say this. So sadly, also, I was looking at so people who commit suicide because they're so depressed, they feel so hopeless. Nothing like that woman. I hope she didn't commit suicide. But it's like, my life is hopeless, my life is meaningless, and so forth. And we're talking, I mentioned it because we were talking about this yesterday at one of our teachers over at Vajrayana Institute. And she was very good working with people who had suicidal ideation. And one example was somebody who was feeling suicidal because, you know, my life's meaningless and there's no hope, there's no future, and so forth. And I just feel, and then, you know, the teacher who was a trained counsellor and had further conversation asking, well, why do you feel like that? Oh, this is going wrong at work, that's going wrong at work. Well, maybe and I feel like I need time out. Well, maybe take 6 months out rather than take out your whole life, you know, take out 6 months. And I can't do that. Somebody else might come into my job. It's just like, hold on a minute. You're suicidal, but you're... So there's way in then to guide through, because these two thoughts are contradictory, aren't they? I'm going to commit suicide, but I want them to keep my job for me. You know, so I'm not mocking it, because we do hold these different, you might have not thought as contradictory states of mind. And then when we look at it and go, actually, we're such a contradiction to ourselves. So interrogating that. And sadly, I saw that suicide is the third greatest cause of death in Australia. It's shocking. Greater than, or, you know, sort of being killed on the road. And particularly, I think it was in the either 17 or 19 to 49-year-old age group. And that's the age group that you're most active in life. I didn't look at a breakdown, but I have heard that before, particularly men. But in that age group where typically you would be the most productive in your life, isn't it? The most, yeah. So yeah. As a society, we would have a lot of healing to do. So if we look at different wrong views, different attitudes I was talking about in terms of permanence of, you know, we think we will go on and on. And we know, I know very clearly this body's not going to go on. It's telling me big time. We call it perishing aggregates, body and mind. That it's constantly in a state of change, constantly in a state of flux. Or, you know, we believe that we hold bad ethics as supreme, like as long as I get away from it. Greed's okay, or war's okay, because I have a right to protect or expand, or whatever mindsets people have. So these are all very clearly wrong views, do a lot of damage in the world, as we know, those sorts of views. And there's, you know, this also plays in the fact that those who have wrong view about the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, who don't believe in that natural law of causality, that every result, everything that happens has a cause. And from the Buddhist teachings, this is regarded as a wrong view and very limiting view. So if we have a, excuse me, correct view of cause and effect, everything is possible. If we have a correct view of cause and effect, that I can bring together the causes and conditions for a transformation of my mind, for a transformation of how I live. I can make decisions. I can change. I do change, but I can channel that change in a beneficial direction, right? So then you're bringing your mind more and more into the alignment with the cause and effect. But if you don't believe in that cause and effect, then you won't obey the laws of cause and effect. So you won't respect certain behaviors which are helpful. You believe maybe there's no reason that things happen. Oh, it's all just random. Right? There are people who believe that. Or there's no benefit in behaving ethically. As long as I get away with it, what does it matter? And there's a lot of that going on in the world. And then, there's certain negative behaviors, negative ways of thinking, negative ways of speaking to yourself, the environment, to others, has those impacts, either directly harmful to all of those, directly or indirectly. So when we don't have a correct view and we just do whatever we like, disregard the consequences, usually such a person is quite callous, lacking in empathy, lacking intelligence for sure, isn't it? When I was visiting prisons a lot, I'd see a lot of people who disregarded the consequences. Some of them had a wake-up call in prison. They landed up in prison, but they saw it as an opportunity. Not everybody in prison does that. Saw an opportunity to take the time that they were in there to turn their life around, to become beneficial instead of taking, giving. And, if that's what it takes to want to transform your life, this sort of dramatic consequence of ending up in a prison system, then that's what it takes. But we don't want to do that. And as Lama Zopa Rinpoche would remind us, we're all in a prison of our own creation. We all create limitations, boundaries for ourselves that are self-imposed. So we have what we might call tunnel vision. The idea of tunnel vision, that you just everything and you can't see outside possibilities. It's just like there's only one way to go, and that's forward. The white light at the end of the tunnel, or the dark light, or whatever, the escape route at the end of the tunnel. But you're in a tunnel, right? You don't even realize that you can actually go backwards in the tunnel. But then who created the tunnel? You did. So you can uncreate it. You can deconstruct the tunnel and realize there's no tunnel actually. I can just, have a spacious mind, have an open mind, not be so narrow and constricting and tight. You just be very spacious, very open to possibilities that, go beyond the limitations that we place. The mind has unlimited potential. The body's another thing, but the mind has unlimited potential. And so as long as we don't, build our tunnels or brick walls or whatever, we're creating those limitations. We're creating, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, the people who are in the physical prison know they're in prison. The rest of us are in the mental prison and don't realise. So we have to look at, where am I limiting my possibilities? So continuing on, there are wrong perceptions nonetheless in relation to how we view reality. So from the Buddha's teaching, asserting the existence of objects of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. If you have a correct view, observing, respecting, validating the existence of the objects of refuge, there are immense benefits. Those of us who've taken formal refuge or at least considered the power of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and have committed ourselves to that path, we know about the benefits that we can enjoy. We get them more and more and more, such about learning the teachings and following the extensive teachings, taking vows that protect our mind, you know, these beneficial teachings of the Buddha on wisdom and methods to bring us to our own enlightenment. But if we don't have respect for the Buddha as an object of refuge, we won't have that genuine sense of reliance on the Buddha. And same with the Dharma, you know, Dharma being the actual object, the real object of refuge, because it's the teachings, it's the thing that the Buddha taught and all the scholars have commented on and our teachers give us teachings on, you know, that seeing that is the direct refuge that's going to liberate us. And if when we do see that, we very much want to discipline our body, speech, and mind, you know, and act in accordance under the guidance of the Dharma. And then we reap the benefits of that. So in Mahayana context Dharma, it's sort of like minimum, be of benefit to others. However, if not that, as the Buddha said, if we can't benefit others, at least cause no harm. At least cause no harm. And if we unpack that, that's profound. Causing no harm with what we say, with what we do. Causing no harm to ourselves with what we think. I mean, that, just taking that is massive, is huge. Because the more you unpack that, the more you find it's so hard not to do any harm. To do no harm is so hard. To any living being, to ourselves, to the environment, friends, family, so forth. But doing that, you know, doing that, respecting the teachings as a refuge, you know, following the instructions of the teachings, following the Guru, Lama as a guide, following the Buddha Dharma Sangha brings immense protection, isn't it? Immense protection for our actions of body, speech, and mind. It motivates us to engage in ethical, good conduct, to restrain ourselves from the thing you just want to blurt out that you know is not going to be helpful and probably going to be harmful. So it creates a very wholesome, as the Buddha called it, wholesome environment within our mind, beneficial, within our perceptional world, and within our society, within friends, within family. You think about it, just one person's correct perception and acting on that correct view has a huge impact in the world today. Huge, because there's so much negativity. I think about social media and I think there's so much negativity there. Just determining to always put beneficial, positive posts, right? Turning people's mind towards love, compassion, joy, the environment, whatever, is quite profound, has a profound impact in the world today. Just one person doing it. Really, think about it. You know, one of our fellow nuns, she used to say when she was young, her mother told her she was totally lacking in compassion. Now, of course, Charles Darwin said we're all hardwired for compassion. We can't help but help human beings. Anyway, these days, did her mother die? Yeah. Anyway, up until she died, of course, the mother totally transformed the view of her daughter. And I don't know, I didn't know her daughter when she was young and seemingly lacking in compassion. But if that transformation happened, there's no way lacking in compassion whatsoever. You know, beautiful.
Apparently, when the mother said that to her, she said, "Yes, Mum, but I can learn."
Yes, Mum, but I can learn. Well, she certainly learned. Well, she acknowledged it, right? I can learn. We can all learn. That's the whole point. So if we similarly take the Sangha as a refuge, so we can, in relation to ordinary Sangha, you know, stay close to them or be around Sangha because they have more vows than you do as lay people. And it brings a lot of discipline, sometimes even inspiration, but certainly a lot of discipline in our own lives. And that's very much based on non-violence, on ahimsa, doing no harm, based on peace. Very beneficial. So that, looking at the Sangha, and here I'm using the sort of ordinary Sangha in terms of monks and nuns, every aspect of body, speech, and mind being in accordance with the vows of the Vinaya, as set down by the Buddha. So this is all about harmonizing the inner and outer existence, our existence, in a state of peace, in a state of restraint, taking responsibility, I guess. Having a sense of renunciation towards misdeeds, harmful environments, and so forth. You won't find us hanging out down the pub or, many other places, but particularly that one, I guess, is quite a thing. And practicing vows of renunciation. This is what is symbolized by us wearing robes, is that we've renounced certain hairstyles. Before I got ordained, I said to my hairdresser, well, that's the last time you're going to be seeing me. And she said, no, you've got to come back and show me what you look like. Anyway, renouncing that, simplifying, wearing uniform, so that whether monk or nun, you look the same. Yesterday I went to the chemist, and after all these years, the woman at the chemist said, I don't know the right way to ask this question. And I said, just ask. She said, so a male is called a monk. What's the female called? And I said, a nun. She says, oh, I've been wondering that for a long time. It's like, it's okay. I said, anyway, sometimes people call us a female monk, and that's fine. They can call us that if they want. They can call us anything, But anyway, it took her a couple of years to gain familiarity to ask that question. So, that's fine. In any case, that's just a by the by. But it is like acting in accordance towards the vows of renunciation. What are we renouncing? So here, of course, as monastics, we're renouncing what we call a householder's way of life, where we practice celibacy, so forth, etc. But what real for all of us renouncing is the harmful actions of our body, speech, and mind. That's all of us, observing in the world beneficial states of mind, wholesome states of mind, wholesome actions, speech, which is beneficial, of course, to ourselves, to our environment around us, the peacefulness of our environment. Such that just think about the Om Mani Padme Hum, sending out positive energy in the environment. I do believe abiding in peace sends out at least non-threatening energy into the environment, that you're not a threat to those around you. And that can be very profound. And, where we live. And it lays a foundation for us to then become Arya Sangha, those beings who have that direct perceptual realization of emptiness, who indeed are in sync with reality, just exactly as it is. So our reliance on Buddha, Dharma, Sangha gives us many benefits. It gives us correct view. And if we have an aversion to the correct view, or don't want to subscribe to it, or we misunderstand it, or we wrongly perceive these representations, they are representations of objects of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, a lot of limitations or obscurations or difficulties come our way. One is losing the great benefits we could have. But we, and people do create negative actions in relation to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. We have this prayer in relation to the Guru, so we say, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. we say, may I not arise heresy for even a second in regard to the actions of the glorious Guru. May I see whatever actions are done as pure. With this devotion, may I receive the blessings in my heart that we get bliss. That it's not like the Buddha goes, ka-ching, and the realizations come. As the Buddha said, I can't do that. I can only show the way. And the only way I can show the way is giving the teachings that tell you, this is what I did. So if you want to achieve what I did, follow this method, follow this path. So that's, and so, we need to realize that any limitations are of our own construct, just like the tunnel we've constructed in our mind. Once we realize it's just an illusion that I have constructed and realize I have limitless potential, then we have access to the mind in its natural state, this clean, clear, spacious awareness of mind, the natural purity of mind, and then striving for that, saying that is who we truly are. It really is like we've got layers and layers and layers of afflictions, toxic states of mind that we have to sort of clear away to be able to access the natural purity of the mind, which is who we truly are. We all have Buddha nature. We might label it something else depending on our faith or lack of faith or whatever. It doesn't matter what we label it, but we all have this natural purity. So last time we looked at, different views in relation to even within the Buddhist schools, different Buddhist scholars and philosophers, layers of limitations of wrong views. For example, coming back to this one of permanence, but there must be something separate to me, inherently out there, nothing to do with me, from its own side, by way of its own characteristics. And we say, why? We have these 4 schools, which we looked at last month, and really all of those Buddhist schools, already very advanced from the very beginning, looking at refining where our mind holds wrong views, misperceptions, right? And then little bit by little bit, as we purify our mind and we come to the ultimate view of reality, the correct view of conventional reality and the ultimate reality. And this is very much, the propounded by the middle way consequence school, starting with, Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and of course mostly we follow Lama Tsongkhapa. That following that, we have all the temporal benefits of this life. We can have a relaxed, spacious, open mind, not be so uptight and so forth, keep doing our practice and study and understanding and so forth, but in a joyous, relaxed way, and getting the ultimate benefits of chipping away at this ignorant state of mind that makes all these mistakes. And once we're free of that, attaining some, as it's called, perfect peace, the peace of nirvana, blissful state of nirvana. But until we ascertain that correct view, the right view of reality, there's no possibility of attaining that. And even looking at stages of liberation, there's different stages. They talk about, the one-time returners and the non-abiding nirvana, lower nirvana, enlightenment, and so forth. So some are limited, some are perfected, and this is really in accordance with the quality of our perception. So, and that's on a philosophical view in terms of different schools of belief, even within Buddhism. But, for each of us individually, which makes more sense to us, we're very much shaped, isn't it, by our own attitudes, our beliefs, our views. So if our perception, or we could say then, is very much related to our attitude or our motivation. So if we're filled with this altruistic motivation, my motivation is to be of maximum benefit to all sentient beings without exception. All sentient beings includes all the animals, including all the insects, including all the beings I can't see, all the beings in this world system, other world scenes I can't see, wouldn't have a clue about. I don't know. When they went to the moon, did they see life forms? When they went to, they've been to Mars, right? Yeah. Did they see life forms? I don't know. Yeah. Think so. Maybe they didn't recognize them. Or the extraterrestrials that people see, claim exist, whatever. Keep your mind open. So if our heart's filled with this altruistic intention about ourselves, our life, our purpose, the world, the preciousness of who we are becomes quite great. We talk about having a precious human rebirth, having a perfect human rebirth. What does that mean? It means having all the conditions coming together to be able to harness something very meaningful and profound in life. And rather than this miserable mind of everything's no good and so forth. But it's, our mind, if we have a perception of violence, again, we were talking about this yesterday, not understanding what the attraction of violence is, but it escalating in the world. The number of movies, the number of, what do they call them, computer games, whatever, that are about violence. I thought about that guy in Norway, who just absorbed himself in films and videos about violence. So that became his world. So we've got to be very careful what we read, what we watch, and so forth. We're very sort of receptive to stuff. And it's like, what do I want to put in there? Do I want to put into mind that garbage, or do I want to put in mind something beneficial, helpful? And then as one of the women said yesterday, yeah, but sometimes you just want to relax. And I said, yeah, but you can relax and have the feel good movies or whatever. I think they still exist. Think, what do I remember years and years ago, I was reading a particular crime author who seemed to have a knack of, just when you got to that end of that chapter, I thought she knows the mind of addiction, addicted to what happens. Because you get to the end of the chapter and you think, oh, I'll stop reading now. And then it's like, oh no, but I have to know what happens next. Before you know it, you've read the whole book. And you've got to read the next one and the next one. And I stopped reading it when I realised there's not one nice character in any of these books. Why fill myself with all this negativity? There's not mine anyway. But we can be very susceptible. We need to make that choice. And yeah, I talked about that. So as spiritual practitioners, let's come to that. Of course, we can still have, even with the best intention, all sorts of wrong perceptions as well. Maybe I'm too old to practice. I came to this too late. I wish I'd come to it 30 years ago, whatever. Or I'm not in solitude in the cave, that's why I can't practice. Or my guru's passed, I can't practice. Everything's going to, now that, I've heard this, now that Lama Zopa Rinpoche's gone, what to do, the whole organisation's going to fall apart. Hasn't happened, 2 years, whatever, 2.5 years now. I think so. Yeah. All the excuses of why I can't practice, I have limitations, oh, I only got some teachings, I didn't manage to get enough teachings, I'm not a good practitioner, I'm not a good learner. I hear it so many times, people come in and with this, I mean, I grew up with Catholic guilt, I'm very good at it, but they'd come in and it would be like a confession. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't meditated. And, well, you're here. Welcome, you know, you're here. It's hard, you know. Oh, I'm not a good practitioner. I don't learn. You know, I didn't meditate every day. I don't have a guru. They have that guru. I don't have that guru. You know, my environment's too hard for spiritual practice. We can give ourselves many, many excuses, can't we? Many, many reasons why it's so hard. Really, it's not. It's just, I mean, everything we do, thinking of doing it from a positive attitude. Think of for our own benefit, you know, that it benefits our own mind. And this guy I first visited in prison, the first time I was asked to visit was 2006, 7. Anyway, so when I was visiting him, and he was, there I was, sitting in meditation, everything was going very nicely. And then he said, 5 minutes later, my cellmate really pissed me off. And I said, well, you had that for at least 5 minutes. I mean, I don't know how long he was meditating, that you never had before in your life. And then when I told him he could do Vajrasattva practice before he went to bed, and then he wasn't going to be harming anybody, so his mind was in pure mind for those 8 hours that he was asleep, then he was, that's fantastic. Because we have to rewrite our scripts about ourselves, our beliefs about ourselves, right? So just that doesn't take a lot. But, you know, our beliefs, really, even we meet the Dharma and we're trying to get our heads around this, we're well habituated by many layers, lifetime after lifetime, of negative perceptions, of wrong perceptions. You know, even this life, you know, from when we're born up to now, we could say a lot of our perceptions have been habituated with mistaken information. And now we have all these fake truths and fake news. I mean, there's no hope for us, is there?
Post-truth world.
A post-truth world. We're not interested in truth, apparently. So that makes it even more unique when you are, just like the Buddha back there being one of the seekers of truth and going through all those hardships, like, yeah, don't buy that stuff. So very, very difficult. But, you know, we're at least very habituated to this dualistic perception of you out there, me here, nothing to do with each other. And we know, as the Buddha taught, everything is interdependent, causes and conditions. Everything arises in relation to cause and conditions. Nothing pops out of nowhere for no reason. That everything has causes and conditions, and everything is interrelated. You know, we go from a very gross level down to the most subtle level. You know, and again, I like to use the example of COVID. This thing we couldn't even see made us see how we were interconnected all around the world very quickly, wasn't it? You know, except for Western Australia, which had a big wall. We couldn't get in. had to wait for the opportunity to get in. But, you know, we saw that play out in the world, didn't we? You know, and it's just like something so hidden and yet so dangerous, right? Because of our interdependence, our interconnection. But, you know, that coming to, I'll talk about that next week. We won't have enough time today. So where am I going today? So I'll just finish off with, until we become that Arya being that directly in sync with reality, directly doesn't elaborate on top of what is there, what isn't there, really just see things as they are correctly, right? This is beyond how we first perceive things. The real reality is beyond what we hear, what we see, what we think, what we experience. but it is the goal for us to reach, and it is possible because so many beings have achieved that. Therefore, we can do that too. All right, we best end there for today and go on with this next time. I'm just going to highlight where we're up to. Any questions, comments? Okay. A lot to digest. So on page 8, we have the end of day dedication. So dedicate all that, all your beneficial motivation and engagement, listening, reflecting, and so forth, to continue to grow and grow our right views in our mental continuum. Gewadi no do da la ma sangye no gyone dro wa chi kamalu de sala Go pa shu jan chup sen chup rin po she ma ke pa nam de ku chi ge pa nam pa me pa go ne go du pa wa shu. Next page, the prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Sravakras, Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge in internet lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Long life prayer for Tenzin Zopa Rinpoche. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings. Foremost and holy Lama, to you for our supreme, we make this prayer of supplication. Lama, please, please live well. Okay, thank you all very much. That's part 1. We'll continue on next week. We do have Gen Sondu teaching here at 4:30. And so in the meantime, if people would like to stick around, have a cup of chat, I mean, it's up to you. Whether you've had enough for today, if you'd like to stay or check out the free books, etc. We've got these set up for this evening. At 6:30, we're having a puja for our dear friend, member, very long-term member, Tom Hogarth, who passed away suddenly Sunday night, Monday morning. And so we will be, because a lot of people know Tom and want to just reflect on Tom. So we'll have a puja, and then if anybody wants to share reflections about Tom, a couple of his mother and sister are coming along, and then we make light offerings as a sort of share our thoughts or whatever we wish to have for Tom. So Tom would most recently be volunteering here every Wednesday, sometimes 2 days a week, dependent on filling in for other people, and also care of the library. So, but has very long association with the centre. We're very sad. Okay, thank you very much.